It's preparing the live stream, so it'll be another couple seconds. 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 Live stream, so it'll be another couple seconds.
Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe in you. Don't try to be, just be. Don't try to be, just be. Inhale, exhale, breathe. I Inhale, exhale, breathe. I believe. Nobody do. Just breathe. Nobody do. Just breathe.
Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties there. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ibrahim Abe Ali, President of Asian Pacific Americans in Higher Education. Let us first acknowledge and pay respects to the indigenous tribal communities that have for centuries harmoniously taken care of the land we are present to receive this live webinar. Welcome to our presentation entitled Silence is Violence, Unpacking and Addressing Anti-AAPI Violence. I want to forewarn you that a wide range of emotions will be expressed and heartfelt today. I want to encourage you to hang in there or take a break if you feel necessary. To initiate some context for the webinar, we will focus in on three main areas. We will critically examine the root cause and effect of anti-AAPI violence. We have an excellent core of speakers lined up in a panel format to answer questions about what we can do to combat anti-AAPI racism. We will discuss the concepts of self-awareness, justice, and truth as it relates to our communities. We will discuss how we can improve our external efforts in advocacy, accountability, and commitment. We want to suggest a meaningful path to heal and move forward. Now, let me turn to a personal experience with regard to self-awareness, as I believe it is the critical ingredient for successfully navigating the roots of anti-AAPI racism in America. Here are some pictures of who I am. My deceased father, Muhammad Ali, my living mother, Yoshi Tamashiro, brother Elias Ali, and sister Nanami Ali. I was born in Tokyo, Japan. I am of African, Somalian, Ethiopian ancestry. I say Somalian, Ethiopian because my father's death record states British Somalian. However, my sister and I recall our father saying repeatedly that we were Ethiopian. Unfortunately, I do not know much more about my family roots in East Africa. My parents and siblings have spent much of our early childhood days between Tokyo, Japan, and Honolulu, Hawaii. Although there was a noticeable family disagreement against my mother and father marrying, my mother's parents and siblings embraced and loved us immediately upon birth. My dad had a good world trade business job requiring him to speak multiple languages, and we lived comfortably in Tokyo, Japan. However, growing up in Hawaii was not as comfortable. Early on in my childhood, we struggled financially and emotionally. Alcohol took over my father's mind and soul. My mother took a leap of faith by divorcing my father. We all had a hard time adjusting to living in public assistance housing. My mother carried the tremendous responsibilities of taking care of 3 mixed race children as a waitress at a local Japanese diner. However, my mother equipped herself spiritually as a devout practicing Buddhist, and that helped all of us navigate the challenges and shocks life was bringing us. We recited the teachings of the Lotus Sutra and prayed Nam-myoho Renge Kyo every morning and evening. We prayed to be enlightened, to be protected from harm, and to promote a peaceful coexistence with others and the environment we lived in. I have many blessings of religious faiths to be in my life. I'm married to a Christian. I have learned to appreciate the teachings of Al-Islam through my lifelong friend, Dawood Abdul Haq, My children are Asian, African, and Caucasian. I know it's possible to unconditionally love and coexist peacefully with someone from another culture and religion. We must find ways to discover our true essence, where we came from, and the many contributions we have made to society. Self-awareness can never be taken away from you. In fact, having self-awareness will fuel your vitality and confidence to join forces with others to eradicate the discrimination that is occurring right now. Carter G. Woodson, in his book entitled Miseducation of the Negro, clearly articulates the value of ethnic minorities, truth, uh, rich and relevant cultural contributions to society. We must replace the greedy, savage, heartless imagery portrayed in our current society's media and educational curriculum with truthful and relevant contributions from all people of color. It is my request to each of you to take on the challenge of developing your own self-awareness so that you can become enlightened enough to foster change in your local communities. In the end, this will turn the toxic ills of discrimination in our society into a peaceful healing medicine for all humankind. Take pride in knowing who you are and never give up by speaking up. Thank you. I will now transition over to Dr. Rowena Tamaneng.
Thank you so much, Kuya Abe, for setting the context for all of us in this afternoon's learning from one another and sharing your story. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Rowena Tamaneng, she, her, sha pronouns, and I am privileged to be the president of San Jose City College in the San Jose Evergreen Community College District, and also vice president of Asian Pacific Americans in higher education. Since the mass shooting in Atlanta and the killings of Sun Chung Park, Hyun Jung Grant, Sun Cha Kim, Yong Yu, Zhao Ji Tan, Dao Yu Feng, my heart has been both weeping and enraged at the racially motivated and gender-based violence that continues to plague Black, Indigenous people of color, not only here in the United States, but globally. I am a first-gen Filipina immigrant and member of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, and my lived experience has been marked by the multiple oppressions of racism, classism, and sexism. We know that there are harmful stereotypes about Asian American and Pacific Islander women as exotic, hypersexual, and submissive. And these constructions have easily made us targets for abuse. And overseas, entire sex industries revolving around American Army bases in the Philippines, Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam compound the objectification and fetishization of Asian and Pacific Islander women. The murders that took place on March 16th made me feel yet again that I'm just a disposable commodity. Even the class privilege that I now have will not protect me from the ongoing violence of white supremacy and sexism. So this reality I learned long ago, and this is why I believe that we have to engage in authentic solidarity work and coalition building with an intersectional lens across ethnic and racial lines. While my heart has been weeping with the rise in anti-Asian hate, my spirit at the same time has been lifted by this powerful coalition we have formed between AAPI, A2Mend, and Colegas. The coalition was founded pre-COVID in Los Angeles in 2019, when our three higher ed institutions decided to stand in solidarity in addressing conditions of inequity within the California Community College system. We believe that structural racism permeates and informs all aspects of the community college system, and as a result, is the root cause of the persistent and pervasive gaps of achievement of students of color, accounts for the underrepresentation of faculty of color, and creates the lack of adequate representation of Black, Indigenous, people of color across our different stakeholder groups that influence policies and practices. I'm inspired that our coalition engages in advocacy, anti-racist education, and also developing radical educators who promote issues of equity and race to deconstruct and dismantle structural racism. The coalition knows that the system cannot be changed solely by our own individual organizations. This is why we've come together to mobilize our 4,000 plus strong combined network of higher ed professionals. We see ourselves and our organizations as more than just allies, and we embrace what abolitionist educator Dr. Bettina Love has called co-conspirators, which is about proactively working alongside each other's communities. We seek and create meaningful relationships with each other to support each other. As co-conspirators, we ask each other how our respective organizations can show up to support the work already being done. It also means putting yourself on the line. We also understand that our system is centered in whiteness, which is why the needs of BIPOC students are not prioritized. System transformation also requires white education co-conspirators that are unapologetically anti-racist, committed to listening and learning, and willing to cede power while using privilege to invite others to lead, and also taking political risks to advance BIPOC students' needs. We invite co-conspirators to work with us in equitable partnership to eliminate all forms of discrimination and racism in and outside of our institutions. So thank you for giving me this time. And now I'd like to transition to another Apahe Kuya, Wyman Fong.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. My name is Wyman Fong, and I'm honored to be here today to give voice to the myriad feelings of my API community. I'd like to thank you all for being here with us on this Saturday. The support is pretty overwhelming and meaningful, and from my heavy but hopeful heart, I thank you all for being here. Let me give a shout out to my brother, Dr. Ed Bush, president of Consumnes River College and a member of HMN, who was a founder of the coalition, for starting the conversation that gave us space for today's event. Shout out to Herb and Bull too. So let me gather the courage to speak from my heart, which may offend some here with us today. Let me start with the pandemic. And as you all know, despite the World Health Organization's warnings against referring to COVID-19 as a Chinese virus, we had a president, Donald Trump, who was defiant, who stoked the systematic racism that is and has been. Trump not only continued with defiance, calling it not only the China flu, right? We all heard that it came from Wuhan, but no, it was the way he said the China flu, the Kung flu, and you know what that did? When you bring harm to my community or our communities, my family, all I gotta say is F you. I don't care if you, my friends, are Republicans or Democrats, that's not the issue. I care about the vulnerability of my 85-year-old father, who I must and will protect, my younger sister, my aunts and uncles, my API community with the Chabot Las Pacis Community College District, all my API friends and co-conspirators who may be harmed by just doing the right thing. And the data shows us that in this pandemic, it disproportionately impacts the lives of Blacks, Browns, and with less mention, Indigenous people, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. A deadly, my emphasis, reminder of the effects of structural racism. One of my favorite quotes is, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. This is obviously a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. It reminds me to have the courage to do what is right, no matter how hard it is and no matter the consequence. Monique, could you share our video to our community with the Zoom? Let me warn you that there's going to be some profanity and some harsh words here.
I love to dance.
And I love watching romantic comedies.
I can't stand Phil Collins.
I really like a good tequila.
I don't like football.
I don't like the smell of cigarette
I
smoke.
put ketchup
I'm a coach
on my tuna fish sandwiches.
I don't like pickles.
I wish my parents were still here.
I'm a mother of
I
three.
love ice
I
cream.
love Jesus.
I love traveling.
I used to be a real cowboy.
I miss my brother.
I'm not so crazy about BFFs.
I watch
I
tennis.
hate okra.
I like garlic on my
I
pizza.
hate having to exercise.
I don't like silly movies.
I'm not good with names.
Fucking chink.
I could surf every day for the rest of
I
my
don't
life.
like the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
I'm an only child.
I don't want your Netflix
I'm a
suggestion.
Hollywood stuntman.
I don't like
I
cucumber.
like the color purple.
We hate you people. Go back. Where you
I'm a
belong.
cat person.
Fuck you. Fucking cunt.
I think the designated hitter
I
rule
love
is
baseball.
total bullshit.
And I didn't get a haircut during this pandemic.
I'm not a virus.
I'm not a virus.
I'm not a virus.
I am not a
I'm not a
virus.
virus.
I'm not a virus.
I am not
I'm not
a virus.
I'm not a
I'm not a
virus.
virus.
I'm not a
I
virus.
am not a virus.
I'm your neighbor.
I'm your neighbor.
I'm your neighbor.
Because I thought you have smarter eyes.
I'm your neighbor.
to whatever
I'm your neighbor.
Asian country you belong in.
Part of America.
I was born in the Bay Area.
We are Americans.
I am not weak.
I would fight back.
Stop the hate.
I've been physically assaulted.
Stop the hate.
I will fight back.
Stop the hate.
Stop the hate.
Stop the hate.
Oh my god.
Stop the hate.
Oh my god. Stop the hate.
Enough is enough.
Stop the hate.
Stop the hate.
Enough is enough.
Stop the hate.
Enough is enough.
Stop the hate.
Stop the hate.
Yo, what are you doing?
Enough is enough.
Stop the hate.
Stop the hate.
Stop the hate.
Enough is enough.
Stop the hate.
Stop the hate. Stop the hate.
This is not.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this was heavy, but this is what's real. And this has been growing against our community for over a year now. And I'm not understanding why, to be honest, why it's only now we're gaining national attention. But you know, when I look at things like what has fed the Black Lives Matter movement, or the ongoing discrimination against our Latinx or Indigenous community with less media attention, and anyone and anything that I've missed, this is nothing new. Sharing two more quotes from Martin Luther King, let me recognize that the time is always right to do what is right, and that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This is why the coalition became, and this is why we invite all people to be part of our movement. With that said, I'm pleased to introduce my brother, Dr. Eric Ramones, the Vice Chancellor of Human Resources for the West Valley Mission Community College District, who will introduce other members of our family who are offering their voices of support today. Dr. Ramones, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Wyman, for that introduction. And let's all just take a couple of seconds to breathe in and breathe out, because that was a very, very heavy video. But I do want to set the context to the conversation that's going to happen today. And we do have an esteemed panel of different members of these three associations that are going to be here to shed some wisdom on this particular topic. So first we have Dr. Aaron Vines. He's the Vice President of Student Services at Antelope Valley College. We have President Daryl Foster. He's the president of Los Positos College. We have Dr. Cynthia Olivo, the vice president of student services at Pasadena College. We have Angelica Garcia, the president of Berkeley City College. And then, of course, you've already met Rowena and Abe, who are also going to be on the panel to represent AAPI. So let's start with A2 Mend, Dr. Aaron Vines, for an opening statement.
Good afternoon. I'm delighted to be in this space with everyone. And I'm here to represent AMEN as we denounce Asian and Asian Pacific Islander violence with our AAPI and Kaligas brothers and sisters. I'm proud to say that AMEN stands firmly in solidarity with our AAPI brothers and sisters, condemning all types of anti-violence, anti-Asian violence and xenophobia. When I see the different attacks, we've watched some of them this afternoon, it hurts my heart dearly, all of them. And then there's the elderly that are attacked. And we all have grandparents, and we should all be able to relate. And I'm sure that we all hurt, but it's just something that is just unfathomable, but that is actually happening in our society. AMEN calls on all of our supporters to not be silent, but to be loud and boisterous in your solidarity with the Asian and Asian Pacific Islanders, brothers and sisters. Please understand that we're in this fight against systemic racism together, united as one. This panel is important because we're making a public statement, an announcement that we are in this fight together. We are stronger together. We are a coalition. Although anti-Asian and Asian Pacific Islander violence is not a new act of terrorism, we will not allow it to be normalized by inaction, and we ask all of you to act. What I hope comes of this webinar is that we create a space where we become stronger together in solidarity with our Asian and Asian Pacific Islander brothers and sisters. We'll fight with them against violence. We'll fight for peace. We'll fight for respect. We'll fight for safety. This is a coalition. This is a family thing. We ride together. We are a coalition, and we are committed to supporting one another and to stomp out white supremacy and racism. Thank you for having us.
I'll jump in. Thank you, Dr. Vines. First, I'd like to say how much love and appreciation I have for this coalition, not only for my colleagues who are part of this panel, but for all the members, the board members, the associates of each of our respective organizations represented here today. I also want to express the love that I have for all of you for showing up in this space today. Thank you for engaging and for being here. You know, I want my Asian, American, and Pacific Islander brothers and sisters to know that we see you, we hear you, we're with you. We're all in this together. I'm here because this is personal for me, as it is for many of you, and I want to invite us to see how this is personal for each and every one of us, whatever that means for you, whether we are Asian, American, and Pacific Islander or not. You know, the feelings of fear, anger, frustration, pain, sadness are real, and many of us know how that feels. We also know that these feelings and the experiences that trigger these feelings are not new. You know, we can no longer be pitted against each other within a white supremacist system in which each and every one of our communities have been subjected to discrimination, racism, and violence throughout US history. Earlier, I said this was personal, so let me just share that my identity is someone who is both Black and Asian American. My mom is Korean American, and I'm raising 2 children who are Black, Korean, and Vietnamese American. And I'm showing up today through a personal lens in which my frame of reference and my experiences as a biracial man of color, in which my family, my Korean American mom, my Black and Korean American sister, my Vietnamese American mother and sister-in-law, and my wife, and my multiracial children remain at the forefront of all that I do and all that I feel when I witness the racism, discrimination, and hate directed at Asian American and Pacific Islander persons, particularly our AAPI women. It's painful, it hurts, and it hits close to home. These are the moments where we all must speak up. We all must act. We all have an incredible responsibility to think about what this means for each of us as we process and we continue to heal and see and support one another. So I'm here because I believe that we all must commit to taking actions to dismantle the racist systems that cause the hate and violence that we all must fight together for our collective humanity. So I look forward to our conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Foster, for sharing your personal story. And my name is Dr. Olivo from Colegas. We're here today to demonstrate, that we are with our AAPI family members and community members. We are in coalition with all of you, and we'll do everything we can to dismantle racism. When I see the pain and fear, in my colleagues and loved ones from the AAPI community, it fills me with anger, and it angers us. And I just want you all to know that we'll do everything possible to dismantle this white supremacy culture that has created this. We know what it's like to be scapegoated, and we'll do everything to fight against it. Colegas is here today to show our love, to commit to doing everything possible to bring about justice and peace, and to use our roles, whatever they may be, whether we're faculty, staff, board members, administrators, we'll do everything we can to uplift racial equity and to foster love and social justice in our system, for our students, and for each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Olivo. Buenas tardes, colegas, community members. My name is Dr. Angelica Garcia. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I have the distinct honor of serving as president of Berkeley City College and as co-founder and vice president of Colegas. My heart is about to jump out of my chest right now because on the one hand, I feel a lot of rage and I don't want to hide it. I'm not angry, I'm not hurt, I'm not upset. I feel rage about the outward aggression and violence that's been perpetrated on our AAPI community. But I also have this immense amount of love for the way that we are asking for raza, for colegas and all who are on this webinar and beyond, but for raza that are on this call. This is our fight. This is our community. We are calling on our colegas to stand up, speak out, and break down the very barriers that pit us against each other. And so in this space today, I hope that you will bring your full selves. We are not a monolith. We are so multidimensional, and there is in fact room and space for all of us to bring love. But right now, this moment today is about stopping Asian hate. Thank you.
Appreciate all of your words of solidarity and support, Coalition Pamelia. I think just along with what Angelica just said, I thought I was gonna keep everything together today, but I think just the video and just the repetition of the slurs and as Dr. Foster Darrell said too, for me, it's very personal, not just from my positionality, but the killings in Atlanta and the Korean women who were killed because my husband is Korean American. And so I'm just very familiar with so many of the struggles, that Korean Americans have faced, and also family members in Korea just with the separation because of the war. So it just really hits home. So I do want to say also that, for AAPI, as a representative of AAPI, I'm here and I'll always be here in these conversations, especially conversations that call for action. because I believe that we, all of us, need to constantly break the silence on all of these racist attacks against not only Asians, but the remainders of our Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, and also to really point out the erasure that happens all the time. You know, even in the media, things get erased very quickly, you know, when the next news comes out, you know, that's sensationalized. So I really appreciate all of you attending in this space. In the transformation of silence into language and action, Black feminist says, will not protect you. And I go to this all the time because I fully agree. My colleagues have talked about how we can't be divided. We can't allow white supremacy to continue to pit us together. And this is how white supremacy is sustained. It's sustained by silencing all of us and pitting us against each other. And so I really want all of us to speak out as much as we can. And then in addition to speaking out and engaging in learning and dialogue, to really take action for the changes that we want to see, the changes that we want to see in our institutions, externally in the broader society, and then really the changes that we want to see for our students and the communities in which our students and all of us come from. So with that, I'll go ahead and transition it back to Eric. But just thank you again, everybody. My heart is full, and I'm ready for the dialogue to come.
Thank you, everybody, for that opening remarks from everyone. This is obviously a sobering moment in our history, and it's so necessary to come together and have this conversation, no matter how heartbreaking it might be. And then, of course, moving forward to taking action. And we're going to talk some about action steps that we can take later on. So we do have a few questions that I'm going to be asking of the panel, but I encourage you to go into the Q&A feature and enter your questions if you have any. Towards the end, we're going to carve out some time to see if we can answer some of those questions. And so that will not take place in the chat function, it will take place in the Q&A function. So please, if you have a question, we'll be monitoring the Q&A. So the first question I have for the panelists is, how have you experienced white supremacy in action, dividing our communities from supporting each other and working together for each other's liberation?
I'll go ahead and start, Eric, with this first question. And I think it's a good one. And there's, I think, many examples recently of, you know, how this has divided our communities. But I think in this past year, especially with the murder of George Floyd, I've been reflecting back on my days as an undergraduate, you know, at UC Irvine. And what comes to mind for me right now is that the LA uprising. So what happened in Los Angeles in 1992, and if you recall, I mean, it's almost 30 years ago, but just still so vivid in my mind. In 1991, we had LAPD officers were videotaped brutally, severely beating Rodney King. And that video went viral and was circulated. And then 1 year later, in 1992, the 4 police officers were found not guilty in the assault. And then we had anger and violence erupting in LA for a number of days. And then as a result, we had 60 people that were killed And then there was about a 1 billion in damage to businesses that were mostly owned by Korean Americans and Korean immigrants. So that was my senior year at Irvine. And I had a couple of Korean American friends that were in my study group. And one of my friends' family business was destroyed during that time. And what I also remember about it was that the media depicted the uprising as a racial conflict between African Americans and Koreans. And part of this was because also prior, there was the killing of 15-year-old Latasha Harlins, who was shot by a Korean liquor store owner, Soon Ja-do, who thought she was shoplifting. And then the results of that trial also came out, and the Korean shop owner was given a very light sentence, for the manslaughter charges. And so there was a lot of anger and there was a lot of rage. And then because from my memory, because the media depicted the uprising in this way, it minimized the racial tensions that had already been taking place for a long time between the LAPD and minoritized communities that had long existed because of the lack of accountability of police abuse. And so this is not new. We've heard this, in many urban cities across the United States. And we continue to hear about this issue even with the aftermath of George Floyd today. The other thing that comes to my mind why I think it's important to think about what happened in 1992 is because it also revealed how white supremacy over and over divides our communities. And so it was because it was dominantly portrayed as a war between Black and Koreans, Blacks and Asians, it really elided what was really going on in LA and what was taking place for years. The other thing that I wanted to call out was that in the social justice organizing that took place afterwards, which even produced a documentary called Saigu, that in the interviews in that documentary, it also revealed that anti-Blackness does exist within the Asian community, because some of the immigrants that were interviewed in the documentary, they talked about how they had all of these images of what America would be before they immigrated, and they had stereotypes that they had internalized, of African Americans and also of Mexican Americans, when before they immigrated. So I wanted to call that out because I think we, in the Asian American community, broadly speaking, have to also have authentic conversations and dialogue about anti-Blackness. So if we're going to engage in solidarity work across our communities, then we have to be able to have those hard and fierce discussions amongst ourselves. And I know that for the Filipino community, we were having those discussions even on social media, and people were upset because Filipinos were calling out anti-Blackness within our own community. And what I tell people is that I experienced that growing up because I'm darker, my skin is browner like my dad. And so I had relatives giving me papaya soap to bleach my skin, telling me not to go to the beach and hang out with my friends. I even had relatives pinching my nose so that it could look thinner because, the idea of beauty, because of the colonialism that has happened under Spain and the United States, is to be white. And so whiteness is valued. And even from an early age, I was being told that I wasn't good enough because I wasn't light, because I didn't look mestiza or white. So I think I'll go ahead and end there.
Marina, thank you for your comments. I'll jump in. Thanks for bringing up 1992. I was a sophomore at UC Davis, and being Black and Korean, I was conflicted when that was happening. And as a result, at UC Davis, I was a part of a group who established an African Asian bicultural coalition. And we ended up having a conference and some dialogue regarding what was happening in LA. And I think that just speaks to how important unity is and these coalitions are, and how important it is to have these dialogues. And that was just a great example of how our communities have worked together. I appreciate the historical perspective, and I really want to share a personal story. You talked a lot about anti-Blackness, and I just really want to share a little bit about an experience in regards to how white supremacy is really prevalent in our communities, but more specifically, how it's prevalent in our homes, and it can divide our families. To your point, Rowena, many of our families, immediate and extended, they're complex. There are times and situations in which we need to acknowledge the hard and harsh conversations that need to take place. Many of us are challenged by having courageous conversations at work. How many of us really need to have courageous conversations within our own families? I grew up, as I shared, with a Korean American mom who always told me to pull up my pants, tuck in my shirt, and look presentable. My mom didn't want me to hang out with some of my friends growing up because they were a, bad influence, and they were my Black friends. Remember, my mom is Korean and married to my Black father. So I acknowledge that these conversations are never easy, especially with people that we love. And I often, it's not often, it's not because it's a lack of want to. Sometimes we feel that we can't have these conversations, and sometimes our loved ones, don't get it, and sometimes they'll never get it. Unfortunately, it's these issues that where racism and discrimination exists, and within our families, that's just an ugly truth. So I really just quickly want to just share, it wasn't easy for my wife and I when we got married. Specifically, it wasn't easy for her. Her parents are very traditional, and being with a Black man was out of the question. So while we were dating, it was getting serious. My wife invited me to her parents' house for Thanksgiving, and I had to ask her, do your parents know I'm Black? And she said no. And I said, I'm not going until you tell them about me. And I wanted to know if they were okay with it. And at that moment, they were not, because it wasn't that I wasn't a good person. It wasn't that I wasn't Asian. It was simply because of the color of my skin. And so, I knew I could not be with someone or marry somebody whose parents did not accept me. And so my wife was put in an impossible situation and had the courage to speak out and against her parents, and was willing to fight for me and to fight for us within her family. And so, that was hard, but I know that was love, right? And because of her love, we've created a new family. After 13 years of marriage, her parents have 2 beautiful grandchildren, which they love, and they have me, a son-in-law. And so, our love for each other is strong and mutual. And in some of our families where there are traditional and cultural norms that go against the status quo, it's the work in which we really need to confront, those issues. And that's okay to acknowledge. We have to have these difficult conversations sometimes in our families, and with our friends, to change ourselves, our families, and our communities.
Daryl, and Rowena, our stories in a lot of ways are so similar. And I think when I think back to your question, which was white supremacy in action and how it divides our communities, I think that what I heard Rowena and Daryl share was the anchored beliefs in anti-Blackness, and the further away you are from Blackness, somehow the better off you are. And those are stories that get peddled to us. And they're not just stories, though. They are legislated. They're governed by law. They're policed, right, in the educational system. And so I think of the 1960s, and I come from the Central Valley. I come from Fresno, Califas, and there's the story of the agriculture movement is strong, and we're about to celebrate Cesar Chavez Day coming coming up. And I always like to say, you can't celebrate the story of Cesar Chavez and the farm worker movement without knowing the name Larry Itliong, without knowing the name that brought, over 2,000 Filipinos as part of that movement to say, no uvas, right? No grapes. Because the stories before that, and at least stories that got told and passed down to me from my mom, my tios, my tias, my grandparents, were that, the story you were told is, well, at least you have a job and don't let them, quote unquote, them in. And in the Central Valley, it was Filipino, it was Hmong, Vietnamese. And so when you get told that your livelihood is conditioned on those people not having access to your job or taking away your job, and your livelihood is at stake, it's like you buy that story, right? You buy this colonial mentality that somehow, well, at least you're not that group. And I appreciate, Daryl, what you said about like having to take on our own families in a lot of ways. Like we have to be brave enough to rewrite those narratives. And I think right now about how, if you look at immigration and the conversation, the discussion around immigration reform, the way that the previous leadership of this country pitted different groups, like making folks feel like perpetual foreigners. And somehow, like if you were lucky to get the magic ticket, if you made the cutoff date, that you could follow a process to receive, no longer be seen as an outsider to this country. I just think like those are the ways where we get divided. Those are the ways where we were legislated and told and governed to believe that you have to hang on for what's mine. And I think that the work that we're doing here and the conversation here is that like we have to break down those barriers. We have to break down the barriers that have been set before us. So I think where I want to end my comments here is, how do we, in the spaces that we occupy, combat the narratives that have just put us in these places to operate out of fear instead of operating out of our very own strength within our respective communities.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Very powerful words, and appreciate all of the panelists' answers. The next question we have, because we know that this happened since last year, 3,800 plus attacks against AAPI have happened in our country. And it just seemed like there was no conversation about it. So why do you think it has taken so long to bring up AAPI hate?
I'll jump in here and build on what Angelica was sharing, right? That's the way white supremacy works. It works to silence us, right? And then also distract us. Let's be real. There was a lot happening during this global pandemic, right? Our Black community was being targeted. Our Latinx community, we had and still have our children at the border in cages with families. And our API community was experiencing this. And not to mention all of us that were losing loved ones, right, to this pandemic and an insurrection. So there was a lot happening, and it's important for us to be united with each other in solidarity, to also call attention to the macro system at play here, what white supremacy is doing at the macro. This fits into a global, like our narrative of this country of othering and exclusion, right? So I think that it's important to help us all see that we need to work together to do everything we can to dismantle that and to disrupt it using our agency from wherever we're at. So I think it took a long time because a lot was happening, and also because white supremacy was being perpetuated from the very top of our government. And just because that top lead of the government is gone, we have to remember, those sentiments have seeped in and tapped in and activated. And so we have to then counter that, right, with our love, our commitment to racial equity and social justice. So I think that's why it took a long time. What I'm happy about is that we're all here now, right? We're organized and we're going to do something about it.
I'll jump in here. Thank you, Cynthia. This is really tough because it has taken a long time. And I really have to say, I have to question our humanity as a country. And I have to say, shame on us. Yes, the media does drive a lot of information for us, but we knew there was an uptick in violence. We knew it, and we waited to respond. In fact, when we were working with our organizations last weekend to plan this webinar, I was excited that we were going to come together, but I was so disappointed that it took us so long. And this is why we're here. This is what our organization is about. And even we took too long. So that portion of it was really sad for me. And there really is no excuse for delay, because beyond the folks on this call, we're a pretty powerful group, and we have the ability to multitask, and we have the ability to look out for ourselves and our brothers and our sisters at the same time. We have that ability. So it's disheartening, and we should be concerned about all of the mistreatment, the violence, the white supremacy that's going on, no matter who it's affecting. Yes, there is a huge movement with Black Lives Matter, and we talked about some of the historical context between the Black and Asian communities. But we have to come together. We're stronger together. We have the ability to address all the issues as a coalition, and we ask that you all join us, and not just on this issue, but as they come along, we need to get together, come together, and not wait, because there is no excuse, in my opinion. There is no excuse for the things that we've been seeing going on with the Asian and Asian Pacific Islander community. There is no excuse for delay. It's too important. I mean, I during the planning, I sat and watched my brothers and sisters in tears as we're planning this. There is no time to wait. The pain is, we can't wait on pain. We can't wait for it to pass. We have to address it every time. The more I think about it, the more sad I get, just because I know how many people are in pain. And it could be someone else tomorrow. It's going to be someone else tomorrow, unfortunately. Thank you.
Aaron, thank you so much for those words. They're just sitting with me right now. And yesterday I was in a meeting and with another organization, and we were talking about the delay in addressing or even issuing just some kind of solidarity statement with another organization. And it was a year delay, a full year, no statement even given last year when so many other districts were already issuing statements, about the rise in hate crimes. And so I was infuriated yesterday in a meeting because I said, why am I doing this work to support this organization, of diverse communities, when we've given you everything that you could do to just even express solidarity last year, and nothing was included? I got this one paragraph statement, no resources were given. And so, we're going to address it, with this other national organization. But I think, from my perspective, we've been talking about this since last year. Like AAPI, members of AAPI, folks that are in ethnic studies, folks that are in Asian American studies, we already were thinking something was going to be coming, because in the fall of 2019, when Trump, as Wyman pointed out, started using, and the rhetoric already, the, Kung flu, it's a Chinese virus and all of this. So I was just like, okay, here it comes. We're going to be scapegoated again. It's happened in the past, and it's going to happen again. And sure enough, it did. And so we were talking about it. There was already visibility. because Russell at San Francisco State, Dr. Jung, already created the Stop the Hate Center. So there was already reports that were being documented. And then when George Floyd was murdered, you know, the conversation shifted, at least in the AAPI communities, you know, that I was in terms of the circle, because we were hurting, but we realized that it was important, you know, for our community to express solidarity and go all in supporting Black Lives Matter. We did not want to engage in a oppression Olympics. And these were some of the conversations that I had even on my own campus with our AAPI staff association and some of the student organizations that I work with. We wanted to just be very clear that, you know, we are supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. We recognize that this is happening in our community, but we wanted to just demonstrate that and take action, you know, and be in solidarity. So I think that is what was going on that I can share. And I can't speak for all, you know, Asian groups, but at least the organizations that that I work with. And then, of course, we know that with the escalation, you know, and the increase in hate crimes, and once the media starts, you know, showing everything and making things visible, you know, then all of a sudden, you know, it's right there at the center. So that's what I just wanted to add, just from my perspective, and the conversations that have been taking place, you know, even before the pandemic hit, within some of the Asian American organizations.
Thank you. So much pain and suffering, you know, within many communities, especially the AAPI. But that begs the question, how difficult is it to support another community when our own community is experiencing our own pain and suffering?
I'll start with this question. It's I want to first acknowledge that yes, it can be overwhelming and difficult to address race relations in this society, but I do wanna really emphasize that as I spoke of in my opening, it's about self-awareness first. And part of that is balancing out your life and what you can contribute to the cause, if you will. And it's not about splicing up boxes and doing this. It's really about to what level can you get involved? To what level do you have the knowledge to get involved? And once those two things are in place, there's lots of confidence that comes, and it comes out naturally, and you see causes that you get engaged with. And so I always say you don't have the weight of your race and culture on your shoulders. There are many of us that we can lock arms and work together, as we've done here, to combat racism in America and to support each other. Because as was mentioned before, these systems are set up for us to pick on each other. And we don't want to give into that kind of thinking. We all have something to bring to the table, and we all have a responsibility to take care of each other and heal together, and dust ourselves off, pick ourselves up, and move together in unison.
Thank you, Abe. I'll pick up the next part that I can offer is I think, the pain that we experience when we are targets of racism and violence, that's real, and no one can deny that, right? I think the importance here is that we should welcome that opportunity to embrace the commonalities in that experience, and that we have to ensure we unite and acknowledge and recognize the unique ways that we experience racism, and also unite to fight against it, right? So some ways to fight against it would be to uplift our cultural ways of being and knowing, right? To validate and affirm, especially our students who are awakening in this moment and experiencing racism, maybe in their lives, for the first time, understanding it's a part of a macro system. And then also take action through whatever we can do. I would say through, me as the Vice President of Student Services, through our co-curricular experiences, having influence over curricular experiences of our students, and then also the policies that we have in our colleges. So I'll say that, that's what I have to offer to this question.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'll jump in here. So as far as is it difficult to support another community when we're experiencing our own pain? And unfortunately, we've always experienced pain in our communities. And so we can't wait till it doesn't happen any longer. It shouldn't be difficult. The unity should be expected. It needs to be our strategy as we come together as a society. Our strategy needs to be in unity in dealing with the pain and suffering of white supremacy and racism. It's empowering when we do this work. It offers healing as we come together. We need to reflect the love that we want to see with each other. The outside world needs to see that. And we as a coalition, we created this organization because we do realize that by joining forces, we are far more powerful. We knew that we couldn't sit on the sidelines while other groups, other people of color are experiencing white supremacy or racism. We knew we couldn't just wait till it's our turn for there to be a big event to do this work. We all have to be all in all the time, all in all the time. And we are powerful together. We cannot wait until we're no longer experiencing racism, because we'll never join forces. It's going to happen for a long time to come. If we're only concerned about ourselves, with the pain and suffering that affects our own community, it's going to come back to haunt us. We'll be next. We have to help America be anti-racist, and we do it together. And in fact, I think we're, not that it's our responsibility to fix the problem, but I think we're equipped to help America with the problem. Thank you for the question.
So I know that, the oppression and all of the violence and targeting affects each other, and we are, but we also hear from each other within our own communities. Hey, the pain of AAPIs is greater than the pain of the Black community. The pain of the Black community is greater than the pain of the Latinx community. The Jewish Holocaust overarchingly is greater as a turmoil of our country of racism in our history than any other. So how do we actually allow these feelings to come out, and how do we address these feelings when another group says my oppression is worse than yours?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Eric. That's a great question. For me, living in a household where it's multicultural, right? We have these conversations, often, especially when our kids go to bed. My wife was talking about her day, and she doesn't hold back, so I just listen, right? And so that's our time together, and that's where we have these conversations. And what struck me in one of our conversations that we had related to this question is at one point, in her anger and her sadness, she looked at me and she said, but what if my pain is nothing compared to what you've gone through? And, I thought, pain is pain, right? It's painful for me to see that my wife has to compare her feelings to mine, right? That's not right. So, she shouldn't have to worry about that. And so, for me, the walkaway is, we need to give voice to one another and not worry about whose pain is worse. Pain is pain, right? So we have to support one another. We need to acknowledge each other's struggle for what it is. And we should never be comparing, our struggles to one another. That's what white supremacy, and that's what these structures want us to do, right? So when we talk about feelings of fear, of anger and frustration and sadness, these are feelings that everyone that has experienced discrimination and racism and hate and violence, these are feelings that we all have. And these are real, and these feelings are common, right, to our bond. And so, for us, my wife and I, when we leave these conversations, we ask, well, how are we modeling this for our children on a daily basis, right? We talk about what are we committing to doing every day, right? And so, we talk about the need for equity in our own home, and we also talk about, how we influence equity in our professional careers, right, in our life's work. And so, I think what's important for all of us, whether it be at home and in our workplaces, that we need to continue to support each other on a daily basis, because advocating is hard work, right? It's hard work. And we need that mutual support. It's so necessary in all that we do.
Thanks for sharing that, Daryl. And I wanted to just bridge, Aaron's comments prior, and then yours in terms of this everyday practice that we have in our personal lives with our families, and our communities outside of our institutions, and then also mirroring that practice within our institutions, because that's what we're trying to do within our institutions. And so going back to, Aaron and what others have said already, it is this idea of this practice of love, like practicing love and humanizing, people's experiences, and humanizing and giving voice to what experiences, folks within our own community and across communities, are wanting to share, for comfort or for healing. So I completely agree with you that we have to listen. We shouldn't discount, when people express and they're telling us about their pain. We need to validate, that the experiences happened, and that, going back to an earlier point that Angelica brought up, we're not monolithic too. So within the AAPI community, broadly speaking, we have so many cultural groups, like, like in some institutions, there's like 60 different, cultural groups represented. So because of this, it is important to not just focus on a single narrative, to be open to multiple stories and experiences being shared, and not continue what I, tend to always characterize as this Eurocentric binary. There's always these binaries that get set up. Why does it have to be this is better than this, right? Or this is more painful than this? Why can't it just be both? That both are painful, and all groups are experiencing pain, in their respective ways. And so, so that's what I wanted to offer up, that my strategy all the time is to just try to be a good listener and be empathetic and practice compassion, and then along with that, to really also underscore the importance of, while we are, in pain, while we need to pause, injustice continues, and it's better for us to work together and help and help even in our healing. We have to be together instead of, siloing off and being isolated.
That makes me think of some of Erin's comments earlier. You got me thinking, Erin, like I was like rolling over here. I'm glad my mic was off because I felt like I was really affirming you. And what I wrote here was that unity is our superpower. And if it's our superpower, then how do we ask ourselves, what are the things that we can say, do, not say, not do, that promotes unity? And I think that here, I want to actually call on some learnings or a reflection that my colleague and fellow president, so Dr. David Johnson is the president of Merritt College, and we've been having as leaders a lot of conversations about how to support not only our own individual colleges, but as a district and our local communities. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, we can't racialize the experiences or the injustices when they happen to us, and then rationalize them when they happen to another group. And I feel like, God, that happens so much, right? Like when my pain is my pain, and I know it and I feel it, and it's in my ears and it's in my heart and it's in my voice. And so when it feels so personal, then I can call on all the things of why my pain is so raw. And so, for example, I might even say that acknowledging right now and the hate that's being perpetrated on the Asian community, I even think of the intersectionality, and then you add a layer of, women on that. And then you add a layer of the queer community and the trans community, right? And the more you add layers, man, that pain, those slices just get deeper and deeper and deeper. And so how do we provide space for healing? Well, I think it's like, how do we look at what we can say and what we can do to promote unity, and what we stop saying and stop doing? And so an example, I think, are ways that we don't perpetuate things like the model minority myth, right? We don't perpetuate stories that have been peddled to us about what particular groups are capable or not capable of doing, and really disrupting that. So I'm thinking of like the brave faculty who rewrite curriculum to get it right, the classified professionals who provide the workshops and the programming to make sure that whatever we don't get in the classroom, we can get outside the classroom. I think of us as leaders, how we have to change what we do and how we address the issues. And so with this, I saw in the chat earlier, and it reminded me this idea of, en la kesh, right? Tú eres mi otro yo, right? So this notion of, and all these activists and artists, so en la kesh is tú eres mi otro yo, you are my other half. Audre Lorde talks about there's no single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives. I mean, think about it. We have people who have told us, stop buying the story, that binary, Rowena, right? That binary of black and white, or rich or poor, or whatever that may be. And so I feel like I have a lot more to say on that one, but I want to be respectful and stop. But just know, like, unity is our superpower. So what do we have to do to build unity, and how can we focus on that?
Absolutely, Dr. Garcia. Unity, and we need more of that, definitely. But we still have to address some other painful points. I've had people call me and say, it is the Black community that is attacking our AAPI community. It's other people of color. How could they do that when we stood up for them for Black Lives Matter? How could we allow other communities to attack us when we are? And so the question I have for the panel is, how do we prevent each other from vilifying our other communities of marginalized groups?
Thank you, Eric. I'll take that one. And this one is really a hard one. One thing I think it's important that we don't generalize. Just like all white people are not white supremacists, we have white people here who are in the trenches more than people of color. So we can't generalize. We're in this together. So I think that's one important aspect, is to make sure that our communities understand that that's not a representation of everyone in that particular community. But it hurts. It hurts to see people of color vilifying and marginalizing one another. It hurts because fundamentally, they're doing the work of white supremacists. They are engaging in white supremacy, and they're people of color. And so it's hard to really accept that. But I think what's important is cross-community education and healing in the Asian Pacific Islanders and Black communities, healing in a way that humanizes all of us rather than demonizes or scapegoats any community of color. You can't fight racism with racism. But most importantly, I think, is us again coming together as a powerful coalition, not just the organizations here, but a powerful coalition in calling people in our circles, in our communities, when there is that idea of scapegoatism or racism, but not letting it go by, not letting it pass by, not letting it just go and oh, they just don't understand. No, we got to call them on it every time, 100% of the time, because what's actually happening is they're weakening us. But when communities are fighting against each other, we're doing white supremacy work. We're doing the work for them. Why would we do that? So we have to cross community education and work on communities coming together. People need to see us coming together as we are here. And when the time comes, when we're called upon, I know my AAPI brothers and sisters are going to be there. I know Colegas is going to be there. I know it. And they know that Amen is going to be there. And I think that's how we kind of get away from that negative way of bringing, or that's how we get away from our communities not coming together. Thank you for the good questionnaire.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you, Aaron. For me, that's us subscribing to dominant culture ideology, right? That we have to be at odds with each other and then subscribe to and then give power to white supremacy, and then that's not right. And so for me, it's about uniting our communities so that we draw on our commonalities, right? Our love for our elders, our ancestors, our common bonds and traits. And that's what I love about this coalition, AAPI, Colegas, and Amend, right? Is that we all come together to do what we can to fight against this white supremacy ways of being. And I can't help it, as we were all talking, it made me think of the James Baldwin quote, right? If they take you in the morning, they'll be coming for us that night, right? So just always to remember, right, that we have to be united. It's our job to be united. So hopefully this message can get through to all of us, because remember, we have so many students, so many opportunities to help our students learn and understand this now, so that as they move on in their careers, starting their families or tending to their existing families, we can ensure we're touching the hearts and minds of people so that we're countering anything else that's happening out there. So yeah, let's be united and remain united.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was great knowledge. Aaron, you as well. I completely agree with what's been said. I would describe it, racism is like this virus, right? It knows no person of color. There's not one racism for a white person versus a Black person versus an Asian person. It's all the same ingredient, the same playbook. It's place, dehumanizing pictures, imagery, and unfortunately, make those stereotypes real, a reality as factual truth to what people do. And instead of digging deeper and getting to know our fellow human beings. And that's a difficult thing to do, but it's just one playbook. It's not, and it can result in causing problems for everyone. So the thing is not to feel bad about it, but to do something about it, to learn, so that this doesn't turn into continuing to teach our children, our students, what the concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You keep telling someone you act and walk that way, or you keep holding a stereotype about somebody, it will turn into behavior. And we've got to break the imagery and the discussion that's happening, what we're feeding our children's minds with hope, not only hope, but contributions of folks that look and act and walk and talk just like us. That's the key of self esteem and self-confidence and moving forward. So white children need to learn this, right? As much as that's happening today, the support and privilege that many of us white folks have, we've got to build a balance in changing that imagery. And there's plenty of room for that, plenty of opportunity on a day-by-day basis to extend out and teach and relearn. And it takes time. And it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but you got to think beyond yourself and plant the seeds. And you got to start every day by doing that.
Thank you, Brother Abe, for summing that up so nicely. You know, the fact that anybody is vilified or demonized is wrong, period. I know that people of color get together and oftentimes we do that to our oppressors. And then we start generalizing that all white people are racist towards us. And that's not true. As Dr. Vines mentioned, they're here for us. They're here right now today to learn more about our struggles so they could stand with us in solidarity and push the agenda, challenge the status quo that creates this privilege for them. And so it's just so much powerful words that I've been hearing. And I hope the whole audience today is hearing the same power that I do, because we're all in it together, every single one of us. And I know that some of you look at this panel and say, where is my Pacific Islander brother? Where's my Middle Eastern brother and sister? Where's my Native American Indian or Indigenous Hawaiian? They're not here today. But I'll tell you right now that this coalition stands for everybody. And we're happy to hear from anybody that comes up. You don't have to be Latinx, Asian, API, or African American to be with us. Please reach out to us, everybody. And that's going to conclude our question part, our scripted questions. At this point, I know that there's so much that is being mentioned in the chat, in the Q&A. I'm going to turn this over to Wyman again to field some questions from the Q&A to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you all the family of panelists. We got 48 questions, so I think what I'm going to do is try to get to some questions, and maybe one person kind of pick at that question, and we'll try to get through as much as we can in the next 15 minutes before we provide the audience with our closing remarks for today. So here's one that I think we've gotten a few questions about. How can we address and dismantle the model minority myth and the economic inequalities among each other?
Yeah, I think telling the truth matters. And this is where information and facts, data, reports. I know, Cynthia, you wanted to share some truth about what's happening, but wrapping our minds around factual information is step number one in my opinion, and just making sure that that not only exposing the problem, but there's there's action that comes with it. Now, like I said, you don't have to carry the whole weight of making change tomorrow, but doing something small, doing something needs to happen based on those facts, and sharing those facts with others is very important.
I think it was really important what the panelists said, that we are not monolithic, right? We are all unique. I know for myself, you know, I mean, shame to say, when I went to school, I purposely failed in math because I thought that was what was expected of me as an Asian person, right? But you know, unfortunately, you know, I don't have that silver spoon. I grew up with food stamps, you know, and I've had to work very hard. So thank you for that, Abe. Here's one. What can each person do who is over 65 years old to tell their white neoliberal friends that this is real and we are afraid to just go outside of our homes?
I mean, I believe it's utilize any social circle that you're in to have those direct conversations, right? About that it is unacceptable and needs to stop. And then I have read about, you know, actions that neighbors are taking to protect their Asian neighbors. I believe in Orange County, on Ladera Heights, there is a family that was experiencing racism in the middle of the night, and to the point that their children couldn't sleep through the night. They were afraid, and the household was so disrupted. But what the neighbors did is they signed up to do around the clock, you know, protection of the home. And it made sure that the adolescents that were perpetrating and doing these crimes against this family stopped. So the family could sleep through the night, and the neighbors did this, right? And so I think there's examples that we can learn from. I know Angelica was mentioning that in the Bay Area, there's also some practices that are in place that we could all learn from as well. Heli?
Thank you. Here's one, and I haven't heard of it yet. Have you heard of the Slap an Asian Challenge? As educators, how should we talk to our BIPOC students who are posting these challenges on social media and think this is funny?
So I have a tweener, or, you know, an 11-year-old, and thankfully not connected to that. But as someone who, I have a lot of younger people that I really care about, I think that's an example where we just, you know, you just have to say no, like, and not only no, but hell no. That is not what we do. That is not who we are about. That's not what our family about, our community is about. And take that as a moment for, you are just getting primed to then use that behavior when you are in the workplace, or use that behavior when you are in a community setting. And so I think part of it is, you know, I'll share this. There's sometimes, like, at the end of days, I don't even want to be on a computer. I don't even want to watch the news. I'm just so tired of it. But it's because of things like that that we have to know enough about what's going on so that we know what our young people are experiencing, to then disrupt the stories, because that is how our children are getting hooked on the drug of racism, on the drug of discrimination. They get hooked through games, through paraphernalia, through the gear that they wear, through what they sport, what they don't sport. And so that's a whole other session there about how we interrupt the way that capitalism fuels our children with the very narrative that we're trying to destroy. So I wish I had more tangible, other than to just say, like, no, no, and take all the things away, right? Like I grew up with you know, you get the chancla and, like, no, you can't have that, and they hide it and they lock it up. And so whatever that version for you is, I feel like that is when we have to be the most unapologetic about stopping that for our young people.
And Dr. Garcia, can I just add, I'm sorry for jumping in, Wyman, but I think it's, well, I know it is very important that we show empathy as parents. Unfortunately, there's a lot of opportunity for us to model that behavior by what we're seeing on television. There has to be a level of empathy, and when kids do that, they're not demonstrating that they have empathy within them. So I think it's important to talk through it when things happen. Like we saw earlier, we first started the program. I know our little one, she sees all of our reactions on everything that comes on, because we pay attention to what's going on. and she's able to see our empathy. She's able to see how we care. And I think that is helpful for young people as they're doing these crazy, hateful things.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Angelica. Easy one for you, Dr. Tomanang. You referenced a documentary, and a few people wanted to know what's that called and how could they get that?
I think it was dropped in the chat. It's Saigu. Yeah, it was dropped in the chat.
All right, thank you. All right, next question. How do we confront white denial of racist actions as highlighted in the book, White Fragility?
I can tell you what I do. I show and tell. So let me tell you experience. Some of you already know this, but I am on the Transportation Security Administration's no-fly list. And what that means is my experience at the airport is different from others. And so I once worked at a very conservative district where Kevin McCarthy resides. So I had a colleague, Republican vice chancellor, that worked with me side by side. We're two vice chancellors, the same district. We went to the airport. We went there early. He wondered why we got to go early. Very upset about that. I said, I'll tell you why. I want you to do one thing for me. I want you to observe exactly how I'm treated here at this airport and how you're treated. So we walked up to the line and we said, hey, okay. He got his ticket, lickety. There was no line. I went up to the counter, same time as he did. And it took me roughly 10 minutes to get through, to 10 to 15 minutes. And 10 to 15 minutes when at the counter is forever. And my colleague was just walking up and down. What the hell is going on? I don't understand. And I lit a fire. And he then understood. He just broke down and said, I never knew that this is an example of what racism can be like. And I changed him. I flipped him just like that. A very, very conservative person. And all it took was an example like that. So when I keep saying this is really, it's about, you know, sharing your story, knowing who you are, and convince and speaking up and not being shy about showing people real life examples of how a security agency that I pay taxes to treats me way. And it happens internationally when I'm flying into Japan and flying back to Hawaii. I have had many experiences where I have delayed planes because of this erroneous check, because I have a name called Ibrahim. Ibrahim is English, is Arabic for Abraham. And Abraham has the same story of in the Bible as being the honest one. So there's lots of, positiveness of that name, and why is it is associated with a terrorist is beyond me. And so these are examples. Share a story, share experiences. We should do that on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Abe. I'm gonna say these two questions, which I think our panelists have addressed, but these are questions that are coming about. How do we address our own anti-Blackness in our communities and address it with care and consideration to unlearn this and support each other in our fight against anti-Blackness, number one. And the second one, which is also real, in terms of how people are feeling, is it really disheartens me when I watched on TV that some hate violence being conducted are by Blacks and other people of color against APIs. I thought we stood behind them and should be united too against all kinds of racism. I'd like to hear some constructive feedback from the panelists. Thank you. So we got our own anti-Blackness, and again, the conflict among people of color, right? Any takers for this one?
So I want to just offer, some additional comments on it. So I'll just focus on myself, and my experiences with my family members and relatives. And I want to do that because it's just about the practice that we have and that we have to tackle it within our own families, as Daryl mentioned earlier in the panel discussion, and as an example for then tackling it within our larger community. So for many years, I never said anything. I never said anything to my mother about how she made me feel, around, trying to bleach my skin, and then like looking at my eyes, and then like my nose and all of this stuff. And then I think when I started taking the ethnic studies classes in college, and I was politically awakened, by all of this, the erasure of my history, erasure of experiences, started to understand that there was nobody in my schooling until college that looked like me. And even then, I did not have an AAPI faculty member until graduate school. So I think all of this combined, as I got older, I just started to have conversations, when I would go home. I would just have conversations about what I learned and ask questions to my parents about how come you never told me about, what was going on, like the details in the Philippines after martial law. How come you never told me, you know, uh, about the Hollywood movies that they used to watch? Like even my name, is like a popular name because my dad didn't have enough money and he would go to a movie and he would just see US movies in the Philippines, and he was watching Ivanhoe, and there's a princess there called Rowena, she was the blonde one. So then when I started asking them these questions and I said, how come you didn't call me Rebecca after Elizabeth Taylor, the brunette? And then I figured out, because it was the colonialism, and it's how we've internalized and learned to value whiteness in the Filipino community. And I started telling my parents that I felt bad. I never was satisfied with how I looked, and always wanted to change myself. Until I got older and I was in college and I understood what was going on around the bee myth, all of this stuff, and race, and and they were listening to me, and then they mom was like saying she didn't know that made us feel bad, and my other sister, started telling her the same stuff because my in terms of skin tone. So just wanted to share that.
All right. I think we're kind of getting close to time, so I'm just going to bring up one more question, which I think is a really good question, which is I've heard racist remarks when I'm out shopping. What do I say? Do I call out racism, and how do I do that safely?
I don't mind sharing a little bit here because I find that, well, prior to COVID and maybe even a little bit since, but I often, when I'm out in the community, I have one of my two kids. And so I have two girls, an 11-year-old and a 5-year-old. And I found that their entire life I have had to explain or decode some of the stuff that they hear. So I'm married to a white woman. My wife carried our children. Our oldest daughter is, blonde hair, blue-eyed, recessive genes. And so from a very early age, my oldest daughter used to hear from people's comments, questions to me about how long I've been taking care of her. Because the assumption or the inherent assumption was that I was her caretaker, I was her nanny. And as she got older, I realized I have to get smarter about how I respond, right? Because one, I need to model to her what that response looks like, but two, use it as this educational moment. So I'd like to say that there are some days when I'm a little bit more, shall I say, a little bit more respectful than others. But the bottom line is this, is, let people tell their own stories in some ways. And so when it's about me, I feel like it's no problem for me to be able to say that that comment was inappropriate, or in this case, they used to ask me and I'd be like, oh, what do you mean? And just allow them to dig deeper. But in other kind of settings, and I'll use the public supermarket setting, but then I'd like to use a work example if that's okay. In a public setting like that, I have found myself turning around and looking, going, that was not an appropriate thing to say. And I don't even like try to rationalize, or I just try to take that person back to some element of, you should know better. And if you don't, then now is a moment to reflect on that. And there've been a couple of times when folks have lashed back or have gotten into an argument. And I just keep coming back to like, that that's not an appropriate thing to say, because it was often, unfortunately, to someone who was providing service. They didn't do something fast enough. They didn't get them something that they needed fast enough. But what I will say is, I think in the work environment and in our educational institutions, we're not perfect, right? So we don't always get it right. And there's sometimes when our colleagues don't get it right. And I think that there's opportunities for us, if it's something that's said in a public way, I do think it's important to acknowledge it and disrupt it publicly, no matter how uncomfortable it might be, because the damage of allowing someone to feel further invisible or further marginalized is too great a price to pay. So when it's in public, like it's in an academic senate meeting or it's in a community circle, whatever it is, we need to be able to address it and move on. And then the other is, how do you then follow up with someone to further elaborate on how the comment that they said impacted me, right? So I'm not about to tell someone how to be the experts in their own lives, but I feel they need to hear how what they said or did might have impacted me as a starting point. So I think the public acknowledgement in a way that says it's not okay, and then the private follow-up, because I think it's in the private follow-up where the real work and solidarity and allyship can happen.
Yeah, and to build on that, I'd say, those are teachable moments, right? It's about helping people understand that's not right. And if it's at work, it's following up with, here's some information, here's, let's work on a project together to further that person's understanding, knowledge, compassion, and empathy, as we've talked about here. And then I would just say, absolutely, if you see it happening in public, absolutely intervene. You have to be active in intervening and saying that's not right. And then also making sure the person it's directed towards is okay. And for them to know you're there, you're going to get in the way and intervene when that happens. Absolutely, I would say.
Thank you. Dr. Ramones, you're on.
Yes, and I know that, wow, this is such a fruitful, robust discussion, and we can go on for another hour or more, but it is that time that we need to close up. And I want everyone to make a final closing statement and maybe share one action step that we can take to build more unity within our communities. Dr. Olivo, would you start off?
Yeah, I will say, an action step that colegas will take is to ensure that we partner with AAPI and continue partnering with Amend through our coalition work, so that we can continue to have this dialogue and then create action steps so that we can provide guidance to our colleagues, our institutions, and drive policies, as well as touching the hearts and minds of everyone who works in the system, so that we're doing everything we possibly can to support our students. And then from my space at Pasadena City College, I commit to listening to our students and co-creating with them ways that help them understand, learn, and build on their agency, and also listening to our employees, our coworkers, our beloved coworkers, right, who are experiencing this pain, and then doing what we do as activists, right, creating not just a safe space, but as one of my dear colegas, Dr. Maris Tamayo says, a brave space so that we can ensure we dismantle white supremacy and stop it from happening. Colegas really does commit to that work. So thank you.
I'll go next, Eric, if that's okay. I think there are two things that I'm thinking about right now. One is, even if you don't have children, do yourself a favor and go buy some children's books for yourself about the different communities. There are just some amazing authors out there that are doing good work to reframe the narrative of who is a protagonist and antagonist, what these stories look like. I mean, I love that my kid knows about, as much about Sonia Sotomayor as she does about Harriet Tubman as she does. I mean, she just, right, it's in those early teachings. So even if you don't have children, please get yourself some books. And if you need recommendations, hit me up and I will send them to you. Matter of fact, I could probably even loan them to you because we have that many in my household. So that's one. Two, we have to disaggregate the data. So if anything, go back to your home institution and make yourself smarter about how non-monolithic the Asian American Pacific Islander community is on your campus. I certainly have given myself this challenge, and I need to go back and do that as well, right? So like, just know it. If you have 2 Vietnamese students, then name that you have 2 Vietnamese students, not just the 0.002%, the way that the IPEDS data likes to have us take care of things. And then I think I'll just stop there. I think the data piece is a big one, because even through our own like state chancellor's systems, we do things in these large groups, and IPEDS forces us in these large groups. All right, so we have to do it for them, but we don't have to do it for our own campuses and our own communities. So get down to the details and disaggregate your data.
I'll jump in. Thank you, Dr. Garcia. I first just want to say, what a powerful conversation. I just appreciate the panelists and my colleagues today for just sharing their experiences and just being authentic in how we showed up. So I know all of you who tuned in are walking away with a lot of information and hopefully inspiration. As we think about action, and to build more unity between our communities. I'm looking at it from a day-to-day, experience. And I know we talked a lot about that in terms of what we can do every day. So, for me, I think we need to appreciate our own struggles, but we also need to see your struggle as my struggle, right? Rowena said this earlier, we just need to show compassion. We really need to embrace each other, but we really, truly we just need to love each other. What does that look like to truly love one another? The power structures don't want us to love each other, right? They want us to fight. Dr. King said that hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. So we just really need to embody this every day, So if another person of color is new to your workplace or to my workplace, what do I do, or what do you do to reach out to them and support them and ensure that they're successful? Who are you mentoring and supporting, right? I'll ask myself that same question. Who am I mentoring and supporting? Who are you hiring? Who am I hiring, right? It's an ongoing commitment by all of us each and every day. It's how we need to show up. Every day we are attacked. Every day we are dehumanized. Every day we are silenced. Every day we are passed over. And every day we are killed. So we have to be purposeful about loving and supporting one another to make change happen. And so, recognizing our histories, we're here because of those who have come before us. This is really a defining moment for us to model the way. We talked about how important it is to model the way for our students, for our children. So it's really our responsibility, to show how we show up and not be divided by white supremacy, and that we dismantle the structures that have kept us down. We have to show that we're capable of loving and supporting and uplifting one another through our stories. Abe talked about how important it is to use our voice and share our stories, and really just to be collective in our community. So we say that we stand in solidarity, and that is important, but my charge for all of us is that we also need to act in solidarity each and every day.
I'll go next. So as far as the action step, I think by continuing to educate ourselves and participating in webinars like this one, continuing to learn more and more about each other. But something that Dr. Garcia said, unity is our superpower. We are so mighty together. We are mighty together. And I'm not just saying people of color, but I'm saying people who have love, and people who have empathy, and people that believe in equality. We are powerful together. So the action step would be not standing on the sidelines, jumping all in, all in. If you're feeling comfortable at work, if you're feeling comfortable by sitting on the sidelines, then that's a problem. So jump all in. We cannot let hate be normalized because it happens so much. We have to address it each time we experience it, whether it's like what was explained at the supermarket, in the classroom, wherever it is. So thank you all for being here. This was a wonderful discussion, and we appreciate you all. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ro. Ro, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Abe.
Go ahead.
So I wanted to just echo all of the appreciation that my family members have already expressed to each other, but then also to all of our participants who joined us this afternoon for learning and sharing. And we hope we provided you some, ways that you can bring back the conversations and encourage others to share their stories, to find those commonalities, that I know that we do have, so that we can work together and work stronger together and better together. So for commitments, I know that many of you have received the coalition latest solidarity statement denouncing the hate crimes, where we did have some specific call to action items, and I think we'll drop it into the chat as well. And so I will focus on one that hasn't been elaborated on yet, and it's about making sure that all of you, as you return to your institutions and as you return, to your personal spaces, that you try to hold space, for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, for our classified professionals, for our faculty members, our administrators, and our students, and also include potential co-conspirators, in those types of listening, healing sessions, so people can tell their stories and express what's going on for them right now. I know last week I was in about 4 of them, 2 off campus and 2 on campus. And I even learned so much from my fellow allies that showed up and co-conspirators about their stories and where they found commonalities with what the AAPI community is experiencing right now. And then one more is that we continue the conversation and we continue the learning. So please join us. We extend the invitation to join us to our 2021 AAPI virtual summit, which is taking place on April 15th. And you can just go to AAPI, www.apahinational.org, and send teams. I think when we send teams, to these types of spaces for learning and exchange, then those teams bring it back to our institutions, and then increase the capacity, for us to really learn what our students are experiencing, to help us with their success, and foster their sense of belonging on our campuses. Thank you.
All right. I just want to quickly say thank you to everyone. Many good ideas. Read, and learn, and teach. That's what we can do to make things better for us in our experience, and we'll get there together. And I love you all. This was a tough day to get through, but we went through all the emotions, and we have hope at the end of this. And I'm so optimistic that tomorrow will be better, and that we're going to plant seeds in others to move forward and have a life that we all want in America, because we belong here, and we belong here to have equal justice under the law. All right. So take care. And I just wanted to say that. Shout out to everybody who has contributed to this great event. I'm heartfelt.
Love you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. One love.
One love.
Thank you. Love you all.
Mwah.